Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, I am making a video that I've been wanting to make for quite a while. You see, sometimes on this channel, we look at old decks, old good decks. So if you weren't playing back then, I can tell you all about what the deck was, how it worked, and why it was so good. Today, we are going all the way back to look at the original best Pokemon trading card game deck ever. It's Haymaker. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. A deck we've not really featured on this channel before. Let's change that, shall we? Now, this was really in the base set and jungle expansions, and it focused around 3 key attackers, and if you've not been playing the game that long, they are not going to look terribly exciting. We've got a Hitmonchan that for 1 fighting energy does 20 damage, it's got 70 HP, and for fighting colorless, it does 40. No, ladies and gentlemen, that does not seem particularly exciting. We've got an Electabuzz, which again has 70 HP. For 1 lightning energy, 10 damage, flip a coin, if heads you get paralysis. 2 energy, 30 damage, flip a coin, if heads it does 10 more damage. Tails it does 10 to itself. And Cypher that can do 30 for free energy, but you could use Sword Dance so that next turn its base damage is 60 rather than 30. Although, to be fair, most of these decks tended to play only fighting and lightning energy, so generally speaking, Cypher wouldn't use Sword Stance, it would just be there using Slash. All of these Pokemon have 70 HP. All of them have good damage to energy cost ratio. It's not huge, it's not amazing, but for the time, the amount of damage you did compared to how much energy it took was pretty gosh darned good. They were your main attackers, but we needed some trainer cards to actually fuel this deck, and in terms of consistency, we basically had 4 cards. First of all, we had Bill. Now, Bill is a slightly controversial choice because there's a real space to speed ratio going on here. But Bill said, draw 2 cards. Now there was no such thing as supporter cards back then, so this was just an item card. Back in the day it was just trainers. So it was essentially an item card that said draw 2 cards. That's it. Draw 2 cards. Now, on the one hand, this really sped up your deck because it allowed you to draw cards more quickly. On the other hand, you're basically using 1 card to get 2 cards. It really does start to take space in your deck. Some people would argue that Haymaker was fast and consistent enough without this. Other people are all in favor of playing this to give a little bit of extra speed. I give you the option. The other, what would be supporter but was in fact trainer card back then, Professor Oak. Discard your hand, draw 7 cards. Now, bearing in mind that this was essentially an item card and you could do this every single turn, so you could potentially discard your hand, draw 7, discard your hand, draw 7, discard your hand, draw 7. I mean, nowadays we've got Professor Sycamore, right? And Professor Sycamore sees a lot of play. It's a very good card. This is Professor Sycamore, but as an item card that you can use potentially 4 times a turn. It gets more consistent because computer search was a thing back then, but we're not talking as a 1 in your deck ace spec card. No, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking an item card. Although it did the exact same thing. So what you did was discard any 2 cards from your hand and then search your deck for any 1 card, which is ridiculous. And then we even had Item Finder as well, you know, just in case this deck wasn't ridiculously consistent enough. An Item Finder was Junkarm. No, wait, it was actually better than Junkarm. It was Dowsing Machine. Now, the difference is Junkarm could basically only get your item cards, whereas Dowsing Machine could also get supporter cards. But in a format where there's no such thing as supporter cards and everything's a trainer, yeah. So basically your deck could have 4 Computer Search, 4 Dowsing Machine, 4 Professor Sycamore, and 4 item cards that let you draw 2 cards, and all of these could be played on the same turn. It was utterly, ludicrously consistent. And bearing in mind, right, all you really need here is a basic Pokemon and 1 energy. Now, there were some bigger decks around at the time. Blastoise comes to mind as a bigger deck, using Rain Dance to pop a whole bunch of energy down, and especially as we got a bit later on and Fossil came out and you got Lapras and Articuno, that deck got some decent basic attackers. You had to be able to take out these cards. So what do? Well, we've got a bunch of options. One of them was Gust of Wind. Now, Gust of Wind is Pokemon Catcher, but before it got the errata. Or to put it another way, it's a Lysander as an item card. You can just drag a Pokemon into the active. So if you're against a Blastoise deck, that's alright. Use this to take out their Squirtle before they can actually get up and rolling. That's pretty gosh darn good. Now, if you weren't doing enough damage, that's alright. We've got plus power as well. That's always something that's quite handy to use. Means your attacks do an extra 10 damage. So you could combine Gust of Wind and plus power to take some nice cheeky KOs. And bearing in mind, between Professor Oak, Computer Search and Bill, you're probably going to draw what you need. And Item Finder lets you reuse all of these. We're looking pretty good at this point. But we've got a couple of other cards that could help you last long enough to win. There was both energy removal and super energy removal. These were cards that, well, I mean, stop me if this sounds a little bit obvious, ladies and gentlemen, but they got rid of energy on your opponent's side of the field. So energy removal, just discarded an energy card attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's pretty nice. Super energy removal, discarded 1 energy card from one of your Pokemon, and then 2 energy cards from one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, bearing in mind your attackers like your Hitmonchan and your Electabuzz here are attacking for a single energy, it doesn't really matter if you discard an energy attached to them. But your opponent does not want to lose an energy attached to them, or 2 energy attached to them. So even these decks like Blastoise that could accelerate lots of energy, even decks that could buy enough time to get enough energy on the field, you could use energy removal and super energy removal so that your opponent didn't really gain any advantage from having lots of energy on the field, and you playing a deck with very few energy could come in and absolutely clean up. The other card that saw a lot of play in this deck was Scoop Up. A card which would kind of be broken nowadays. Choose one of your Pokemon in play and return its basic Pokemon card to your hand. Now, if you were playing Evolve Pokemon, it was kind of weird. You could grab the basic and then play it down again to evolve it and all of that. But if you were playing basic Pokemon, it's Super Scoop Up, but you don't need to flip a heads. Which is crazy good. Why would you not want that? Of course you would. So even if your opponent is doing damage, you're just picking up your Pokemon and you're off to go. And remember, I told you earlier that Cyber has free retreat, which means you don't need to worry about using Scoop Up. You can just put Cyber in the active and then you retreat. And that really was the deck. You had Hitmonchan, Electabuzz and Cyber as attackers. You had Bill, Computer Search, Professor Oak, and Item Finder to set up. And then you had Gust of Wind, Energy Removal, Super Energy Removal, and Scoop Up to play a little bit of Prize Denial Disruption. It was faster and more consistent and more efficient than any other deck in the format. And although it didn't get banned per se, there was a rotation. The first ever rotation, which got rid of this deck, and it had to, because this deck was crazy good back in the day, to the point where it could beat basically anything. Now, some of you newer players are probably looking at the trainer cards in this deck and going, that's ridiculous. Yes, back in the base set, the trainer cards were ridiculous. And you're probably looking at the Pokemon going, really? They were good? But yes, they were. Because when you're removing all their energy and taking out all their evolving basics, any bigger, badder deck could not keep up. Now, in terms of other options here, there wasn't really very many. I've gone searching around the internet, and the list on the screen right now is from Bulbapedia, a great website, as are many of the card scans I'm using. But I did search around everywhere, and there really weren't many other cards that saw a lot of play. Now, the Mewtwo movie promo did see a fair amount of play, which was pretty cool. For 1 Psychic Energy, you got to put 2 energy cards from your discard attached to Mewtwo, and then you could do 40 damage with Psyburn, but things like super energy removal made me nervous to play something like Mewtwo. And similarly, we had Magmar, but I'm not a huge fan of Magmar. It again had the 70 HP that we're used to with all of these Haymaker cards. This was, of course, from Fossils. It came out a little bit later. 1 energy, 10 damage, and they've got to flip heads to attack next turn. 2 energy, 20 damage plus flip a coin for poison. I mean, in a format where Pokemon have much lower HP, poison was a lot better, but I never really bought Magmar as a particularly good attacker here. And the other thing we saw was either Energy Search or Rainbow Energy, although Rainbow Energy didn't come around until Team Rocket, just to help you out of all the different energy types. But honestly, if you played a bunch of Fighting for Hitmonchan, Lightning for Electabuzz, and Double Colorless for Cyber, you'd be pretty much alright with the deck. I don't think they were ever really needed. And then finally, Lass. This one was also suggested by Bulbapedia. And Lass is an alright card. Lass is fine. It basically gets you and your opponent to shuffle all trainer cards from both your hands into your decks. So obviously what you would do is use all your trainer cards and then play Lass. It was decent little disruption. I'm not sure it was needed, but certainly in a deck that aims to be efficient and take cheeky KOs and needs to beat power decks like Blastoise, it could be nice for slowing your opponent down. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Haymaker, the original broken Pokemon deck. It was so good, it really was just about the only viable deck back then. And then a rotation happened and it went away and it's passed into myth. But I've never shown you that deck before. That's been a regret of mine for a little while. I like to think now that we've fixed that. But as always, I want to hear from you guys. Did you play this deck? Have you gone and played it as an old legacy format? Let me know any memories, and if you didn't play it, let me know what you think about the deck in the comment section, of course. Go nuts, but remember the rule. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel and get some bonus pods, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do that. And of course, do check out Wassy Plays for some Dragon Ball Super and Transformers TCG action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.